All right, we're turning back the clock to a single month in British history, April 1986. It was this fascinating moment where the political temperature was rising right alongside the spring weather. What you get is a month of really sharp contrasts, some incredible cultural milestones, and events that, well, they would cast a very long shadow over the future.
So, April 1986 kicks off with this rising temperature. And we're not just talking about a bit of spring sunshine. This was about political heat building at home and some serious military action happening abroad, which put the UK right at the center of some major global events.
But at the very same time, popular culture was just hitting its stride in this vibrant, almost technicolor way. I mean, television, music, even what was happening in the school playgrounds. It was all just exploding with this incredible energy and a ton of new ideas.
And underneath all of that was a world that was just changing incredibly fast. We're going to see some big technological shifts that really marked the end of one era. And a shocking disaster that would completely change how we thought about the fragility of our world.
So, let's start where so many of the big stories did, at the heart of the nation's politics, with the headlines coming out of Westminster.
Politically, this month was a real story of two halves, and it showed two very different sides of Margaret Thatcher's leadership. On one hand, at home, she suffered this rare and pretty stinging defeat. Rebels inside her own party actually rejected her plans to deregulate Sunday shopping. It was a clear check on her power. But on the world stage, she was projecting this immense strength, giving the green light to a major international military action as American jets took off from UK bases to carry out these very controversial airstrikes against Libya.
But it wasn't just about those two huge headlines. People's attention was being pulled in all sorts of directions. You had a really key political battle going on in a by-election in Fulham. Then there was the final chapter of a royal drama with the funeral of Wallace Simpson. And then you had the cosmos. I mean, literally all across the country, people were looking up at the night sky, hoping to get that once-in-a-lifetime glimpse of Halley's Comet.
Okay, now if you turned away from the heavy newsprint of the papers and switched on your television, you got a very different story. The mood on screen was definitely a lot more upbeat.
This really captures it. On April 25th, the first ever comic relief telethon just burst onto BBC One. It was a totally new idea, proving you could harness the power of British comedy to change lives. It absolutely was the birth of a charitable legend.
At the same time, another kind of cultural moment was happening. The anti-drug Just Say No campaign, led by the cast of the kids' TV show Grange Hill, was absolutely everywhere. Their song actually became a top 10 hit, and it created this shared playground anthem that, for a whole generation, really helped define the decade.
Now, for anyone looking for a bit of an escape, the cinema was offering these huge, sweeping stories that were captivating audiences all over the country.
Sidney Pollack's epic romance Out of Africa was the undisputed king of the box office, no question. But audiences were also flocking to see the perfect English period drama of Merchant Ivory's A Room with a View. And, just to prove that some stories are absolutely timeless, the re-release of the Disney classic Bambi was still a massive draw for families.
And this brings us to a world really in transition. The tone here shifts a little, gets a bit more reflective, as we look at events that signaled some profound, lasting changes.
In the world of technology, this month really did mark the end of an era. Sir Clive Sinclair, the absolute visionary behind British home computing, sold the rights to his iconic ZX Spectrum computer to his rival, Amstrad. For thousands of people who'd grown up with these machines, this was a huge moment, and it signaled a major shift in the tech landscape.
So the soundtrack to the end of the month was this strange mix of George Michael's beautiful melancholy ballad and Falco's completely eccentric synth-pop hit. You had moments of just pure joy, like Oxford United lifting the milk cup at Wembley. But then, on April 26th, news started to trickle out. News about an accident at a place most people in the UK had never even heard of, the Chernobyl nuclear plant in the Soviet Union.
At first, the reports were vague, but the reality was terrifying. A silent, invisible cloud of radioactive material had been blasted into the atmosphere. There in the UK, at the end of April, people just didn't know the full extent of the danger yet. But the fallout, it was already on its way.
So, April 1986. It was a month of political drama and playground anthems, of legendary comedy and an unseen nuclear threat. It's this incredibly complex picture of laughter and looming danger. And it leaves you with a question. What is it that really defines an era? Is it the headlines we all read, the songs we all sing, or is it the invisible threats that we don't yet understand?